The Princess and the Music Maker. In stories, a princess is often a prisoner. Sometimes an evil person locks her up for revenge. Sometimes the princess's own parents shut her up for safekeeping. A German tale, The Princess Who Was Hidden Underground, tells of a princess kept for years and years in a dark dungeon. In Glass Mountain, a tale told in southern Europe, a king's daughter waits in a castle at the top of a crystal hill. Any suitor trying to reach her slips and slides down glassy slopes. Towers are favored as lockups for princesses. Usually, a prince comes to the rescue, as in Rapunzel, but help can come from unexpected sources too. In the Jewish folktale, The Princess in the Tower, King Solomon shuts away his beautiful daughter, Kezia, to prevent an unsuitable marriage. An eagle outwits him by bringing Kezia's husband-to-be to the tower. Animals often play important roles in the traditional stories of the Mayan people. Birds and beasts think and speak like humans, and occasionally take on human form. A rabbit here called a coney helps to free the imprisoned princess in the next tale. Long ago, in the country we now call Guatemala, there lived a certain greedy king. His kingdom stretched from the mountains above Lake Atitlan to the edge of the jungle. In his storehouse were jars brimming with gold and jade, and with cocoa beans as prized as jewels. But his greatest treasure was his daughter, Princess Makes. Makes was young and graceful. She was as slender as a reed that grew beside the lake, and her hair was dyed the lavender blue of the twilight sky. Many wealthy men wished to marry her. "You will marry whoever offers the most for you," declared the king. "You cannot trade me like a monkey in the market," cried Makes. The king rubbed his hands. "I might exchange my one shy princess for 100 bold warriors." Makes shook her head. "I have already chosen my husband." "Someone royal?" asked her father. "Someone rich?" "Someone wonderful," the princess replied. "He is the man who plays the Charminia in the plaza, and his name is TP." "That poor music maker? The flute blower? Never!" the king bellowed. "Your husband must be worthy of you, and worth much to me." The princess clicked her tongue, but dared say nothing more. That night, before her father could pledge her to another, she slipped past the soldiers sleeping by her door and met the musician in the moonlit plaza. Without a sound, they fled into the shadows. For 3 nights and 3 days, Makes and TP trudged through the highlands, picking sweet green injertos from the trees to eat, and resting at midday and midnight, for those were the unlucky times to travel. They left the cool mountains behind and plunged into the hot, steamy jungle. By day, bright feathered macaws screeched in the trees and spider monkeys swung in the branches. By night, bats swooped overhead and scorpions scuttled underfoot. At last, Makes and TP came to a village of strangers where people dressed in different clothes and spoke with different words. "We have left your father's kingdom," said TP. "We are safe." So that is where the princess and the poor man married. The village women gave Makes a cook pot and corn, and she learned to make the mash called mats. The village man helped TP build a thatched hut. Every evening he sat by the door and played his charania, and the music was sweeter than any bird song. "These are riches enough for me," Makes declared. TP shook his head. Soon the cookpot would be empty. "I must find food for us," he told her. "Stay here, away from harm." Alone, the music maker went back to the hill country, keeping a sharp lookout for any of the king's warriors. Suddenly, he stumbled on a clearing hidden behind a thicket of brambles. On one side was an orchard of plum trees, whose branches bent with yellow fruit. On the other side was a large garden, where corn grew tall, and sweet potato vines twisted among the stalks. In the middle rose a huge house. TP went to the door. "Greetings," he called. "Is anyone at home?" No one answered. "You must be rich, whoever you are," TP said loudly. "One so rich will be glad to share with someone so poor as I." TP gathered an armload of fruits and vegetables from the garden, and that night the princess's cookpot was full to the brim. "Next time I'll go too," Makes insisted. "We'll both fill sacks." "It is dangerous," TP began. "No more for me than for you," the princess retorted. A week later, when the sun was still a pale gold disk in the sky, TP and Makes visited the hidden garden together. Again, no one answered TP's call, and they fell to picking as fast as they could. Neither noticed the ground shake beneath their feet. Neither saw the shadow that suddenly darkened the rows. But both heard a voice rumbling louder than an exploding volcano. "Get out of my garden!" An ogre loomed over them. His head brushed the tree tops, and his legs were stouter than the thickest tree trunk. Two sharp teeth curled up like tusks from the corners of his mouth, and his hair was as bristly as a wild boar's. "Thieves!" roared the ogre, snatching TP with one huge hand and Makes with the other. "Let us go," TP pleaded. "We will never bother you again." You go, the ogre dropped TP. I'll take the woman for my bride. She's a princess, TP protested, and she's my wife. Not any longer. The ogre bound Maix with a stout rope and dragged her into his house. TP ran back to his village. Help me, neighbors, he wailed. A horrible ogre stole my wife. The villagers cowered in their huts and pretended not to understand him. Then TP ran to the rock where the jaguar napped. Help me, cousin cat, he called. A horrible ogre stole my wife. Yawning, the jaguar said, I'll teach him a lesson. It padded after TP to the ogre's house. But when that giant appeared in the doorway swinging a double-bladed battle axe, the big cat trembled so hard it shook off half its spots. Beg pardon, mumbled the jaguar, and dashed into the jungle. Tepi went to the monkeys who hung by their tails in the mango trees. Help me, little brothers. A horrible ogre stole my wife. Help a man? They asked. Men shoot arrows at us. They began throwing mangoes at TP. TP visited the mouse's burrow. A horrible ogre stole my wife. Please, friend mouse, gnaw the ropes that tie her. Free a woman? The mouse stared at him. Women chase mice with brooms. With a squeak, it disappeared down the mouse hole. The music maker trudged back to the ogre's garden. He held his head and moaned, No one will help me rescue Maix. I will. TP looked up and saw a rabbit chomping on a cucumber. A coney? TP shook his head. You are not fierce like a jaguar or clever like a monkey. You don't even have sharp teeth like a mouse. But I have a plan, said the coney. Come back at nightfall and bring a shovel. Help from a rabbit was better than no help at all. So when the evening star shone in the sky, the music maker shouldered his shovel and returned to the garden. Dig, whispered Coney. Make a tunnel beneath the ogre's corn, but don't wake the ogre. Maix had lulled the ogre to sleep with hot chocolate, and his snores were noisier than a howler monkey's shriek. The princess watched TP from the doorway. He dug until dawn. The tunnel needs doors, said Coney. Come back tonight? That night again the ogre slept. Again the princess washed and the music maker dug. By sunup, the tunnel had 12 round door holes. You are not yet finished, Coney told TP. Tonight you must bring a machete. TP returned at twilight, a machete knife over his shoulder. Cut the brambles in the garden. Choose prickly bushes with the sharpest thorns, said Coney. All night, TP chopped briars with his machete. Put the branches into the tunnel doorways, Coney ordered. Gingerly, TP stuffed bristles into each doorway. I don't see how this saves Maix, he grumbled. Watch, cried Coney. The rabbit hopped to the house and pounded the wall with a huge hind foot. Send out the princess, he cried. The ogre thundered out of the house. You meddlesome, lop-eared, bob-tailed troublemaker, he bellowed, lunging for the rabbit. Coney jumped into a tunnel door hole. Can't catch me. Gotcha, cried the ogre, and thrust his arms into the hole. But he did not feel a velvety rabbit skin. Instead, he caught hold of a prickly bramble. "Yee!" he yelped. "Over here!" Coney called from a different door. "I see you!" roared the ogre. But as soon as he stuck his head in the tunnel, a thorny branch poked his eye. Wild with anger, the ogre scrambled from hole to hole, grabbing for the rabbit, but Coney was always a jump head, twitching his nose and wriggling his ears. The brambles did not even ruffle the rabbit's fur, but they ripped the ogre's clothes and scratched and scraped him from foot to face. As the ogre bent over the 12th hole, the music maker swung his machete and shouted, "This is for the princess." But Coney was always a jump head, twitching his nose and wriggling his ears. The brambles did not even ruffle the rabbit's fur, but they ripped the ogre's clothes and scratched and scraped him from foot to face. As the ogre bent over the 12th hole, the music maker swung his machete and shouted, "This is for the princess." The big knife whistled so close to the ogre's scalp that it shaved off every hair. The ogre rubbed his bald head and groaned. Soon everyone would know that a little Coney had fooled him. With a howl of humiliation, the ogre fled over the hills and disappeared into the jungle. Tipi hurried to Mix and cut the ropes that bound her. "At last," said the princess. "It's past time for our supper." The rabbit was already having supper in the ogre's garden. Mix and Tipi bid him farewell and hurried back to the village. Everyone celebrated their safe return. Women danced with copper bells, men beat the two-toned drums, and children blew clay whistles. But the most joyful sounds were the notes played on the chimina by the music maker for Princess Mix.